Government's records show that some of those consulted did not approve the declaration of the national state of disaster over the power crisis. That's according to the organisation Undoing Tax Abuse. OUTA says the records do not explain why a state of disaster was declared and are now challenging this move in court. I'm now joined via Zoom by the organisation's legal project manager, Brendan Slade. Thank you so much for your time, Brendan. Maybe just tell us what evidence is before you that you feel as though there was no proper decision-making and evidence for the country to move in a national state of disaster around our power crisis.
Hi, good afternoon, and thanks for having me. Yes, just to go a step back, we launched an urgent application earlier in February to have the declaration of a national state of disaster set aside. So we were then granted a court order in terms of which the record behind the decision was delivered to us on the 3rd of March. So after we perused the record, it was abundantly clear that government had not applied its mind and within the course of 2 days made an abrupt U-turn on, first of all, the classification of what constitutes a state of disaster and ultimately the declaration itself. So the record reveals that a lot of the stakeholders that were consulted, including NECOM, Eskom and Agri-SA, were all against the declaration of national state disaster, amongst other things, because there is already an existing legislative framework in place that allows us to address this crisis without the declaration being made in the first place.
So, Brendan, did I hear you correctly that Eskom itself said that a national state of disaster should not be declared to deal with the power crisis?
No, most certainly. Eskom also has an action plan to deal with this crisis we are currently in. We just need to comprehend that, yes, we are in an energy crisis and this needs to be addressed as a matter of urgency, but it can be addressed through existing legislative and executive measures. So there's no reason for state of disaster to be declared, because we have seen what a state of disaster and subsequent regulations can do, not only to transparency, but also to the trust among the South African populace in government when we look back at the COVID-19 regulations.
So, Brendan, why would you say a national state of disaster was declared despite evidence and documentation and engagements with all stakeholders said otherwise?
Well, that's $1 million question, to be quite honest with you, because the record reflects there is no evidence to justify a declaration in the first place. So our application is based on the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act. It is a review application. So the mere fact that there is no existing evidence suggesting that a declaration of a national state of disaster should be there, the decision ultimately at the end of the day is not only unlawful, it should be set aside, and it's completely irrational. It's a ludicrous decision made by government, and government should really apply their mind in future. Obviously, we are of the opinion that their mind was not applied under these circumstances.
So you obviously disagree, and I think the answer is rather obvious, but maybe if you can just elaborate. Government says that part of the reason why they decided to go into a national state of disaster to deal with the power crisis is to almost do away with so much red tape that currently exists, you know, when it comes to IPPs or whatever else it might be, and it will just be a lot easier for individuals or businesses to procure electricity. Do you think that that might have been the rationale and the reasoning behind declaring a national state of disaster, or part of the reason?
Well, if that is the hypothetical rationale, it is completely ludicrous, because this state of disaster shows us that the government is reaching for declarations of national state of disasters in instances where it failed. So if we continue on this trend, we might as well declare a national state of disaster for potholes, a national state of disaster for the collapse of local government. So we do not need a state of disaster in order to make determinations or in order to exempt certain industries from load shedding. The existing framework is there. If I can give you some examples, we've got the Public Finance Management Act, we've got the Energy Act, we've got the Electricity Regulation Act, And obviously, we have the Constitution, which, in terms of the Constitution, has an enshrined principle called cooperative governance.
Sorry, Brendan,
absolutely...
Sorry, Brendan, I'm terribly sorry. I'm going to ask you to just hang 10 for us, because we do understand that President Cyril Ramaphosa is currently addressing the media in KwaZulu-Natal.